The lights of ABS-CBN studio in Quezon City glowed softly against the backstage walls as Kokoi Baldo stood in the narrow corridor, clutching his weathered acoustic guitar, the same one he had carried through years of singing on the sidewalks of Bacolod City, the same one that had absorbed every struggle, every sigh, every dream he had ever whispered. His dreadlocks brushed against his shoulders as he inhaled deeply, eyes closed, reminding himself why he came here. This was not just an audition. It was the loudest prayer he would ever offer. He thought of the countless nights at Laxon Street when people passed by without a glance, the way he played even when the rain soaked his clothes, because music was the only thing that never abandoned him. He remembered his mother telling him that talent becomes a blessing only when shared. Tonight, he would share everything. The hallway hummed with distant applause from the contestants before him. Crew members rushed around with headsets, cameras rolled across the floor, and the giant red doors to the stage waited like a gateway to a different life. Kokoi rubbed his thumb over the scratches of his guitar, each mark reminding him of a gig, a story, a survival. He whispered a quiet, "Salamat," unsure if he was thanking God, his supporters, or the universe itself for bringing him here. In his mind, he saw his son back home, sitting in front of the small TV, waiting to see if his father's dream would finally turn into something real. That thought alone made Kokoi's chest ache with both fear and hope. A staff member called his name. His heartbeat throbbed in his ears. He took one step forward, feeling the slight tremble in his knees, but refusing to let it stop him. The double doors opened, flooding his vision with blinding stage lights. Before he even stepped in, he felt the warmth of the studio audience, the unspoken encouragement of hundreds of strangers silently cheering for a man they had yet to know. Kokoi walked toward the center stage slowly, each footstep echoing like a promise. He could see the backs of the iconic red chairs of Lea Salonga, Sarah Geronimo, Bamboo, and APL.ap, still, unmoving, waiting. He wasn't intimidated, he was inspired. These were the people he had admired on TV, the artists who shaped Filipino music, and now he had a chance to let them hear him, truly hear him. The stage air smelled of cold metal and warm lights, a mix of tension and magic. When he finally reached the microphone, he didn't speak. He just touched the guitar strings, letting them rest under his fingertips like a dear friend. He took another breath, slow, steady, the kind taken by a man who has known hunger, known struggle, known the sting of being overlooked, but has never known defeat. His eyes softened as he looked toward the dark audience and whispered inside his heart that whatever happened tonight, he came here carrying the stories of everyone who had ever believed in him. For a moment, silence wrapped the entire studio. Kokoi lifted his chin, placed his fingers on the first chord, and allowed himself to feel everything at once, his past, his pain, his purpose. And just before he strummed, he smiled, because he knew that even if the world had not yet heard him, tonight, it finally would. The studio lights dimmed to a soft glow as Kokoi Baldo stood at the center of the voice of the Philippine stage, his silhouette framed by a quiet tension that filled the entire hall. The audience, though unseen to him, leaned forward collectively, sensing the depth of the moment. The iconic red chairs of Lea Salonga, Sarah Geronimo, Bamboo, and APL.ap remained turned away, their back symbols of both challenge and opportunity. Kokoi adjusted the guitar strap across his shoulder, his fingers brushing lightly over the strings as if seeking comfort from an old friend who had accompanied him through every hardship. His pulse was loud but steady, like the heartbeat of a man who had learned how to survive storms and still find music in the thunder. As silence embraced the room, Kokoi lifted his hand and strummed the very first chord. It rang out pure, raw, and warm, like sunlight breaking through clouds after a long monsoon rain. The sound traveled across the studio, carrying with it fragments of the life he lived in Bacolod. Nights singing under flickering streetlights, mornings waking up to the scent of sea breeze, afternoons spent fixing broken guitar strings with nothing but patience and hope. Each chord carried a story, and each story shaped his voice. Then he began to sing. One day, one day. His voice was not just heard, it was felt. A soulful blend of reggae rhythm and Filipino heart, it wrapped around every listener like a soft embrace. The melody rose gently, flowing from his chest with sincerity that no vocal training could ever replicate. His tone carried the exhaustion of long battles, but also the fire of a man who refused to surrender. The audience gasped softly, many placing hands over their mouths, as if afraid to break the spell he was casting. Lea Salonga's eyebrows lifted, her expression shifting from simple curiosity to deep admiration. She leaned forward slightly, listening not just with her ears, but with her entire spirit. Sarah Geronimo glanced sideways at Lea, her face brightening with the unmistakable spark of awe. She had heard many strong voices, but few carried this kind of authenticity. Bamboo began tapping his fingers on the armrest of his chair, his instinctive response to music that stirred his soul. Kokoi's rhythm had found its way into him, just as reggae had once found its way into Kokoi's life. APL.AP smiled even before the chorus hit. The sincerity in Kokoi's voice reminded him of home, of Filipino streets, where music was not taught but lived, where artists grew from perseverance instead of opportunity. His finger hovered above the red button as he listened, absorbing every word, every crackle of passion in the singer's voice. As Kokoi approached the chorus, his voice soared higher, stronger, as if lifting the weight of every dreamer who ever felt unseen. The audience could feel his spirit pushing through every note. Some wiped tears from their eyes. Others raised their phones silently, letting the moment imprint itself on their memories. Kokoi closed his eyes while singing, not out of fear, but out of surrender, letting the song speak for him, letting his heart take command. Through the lyrics, he poured out everything: his fatherhood, his sacrifices, his years of street performances, the people who told him he'd never be enough, and the few who told him he already was. Then it happened. A loud click echoed through the hall. APL.AP hit the button. His chair spun around with energy, his smile wide and proud. The audience erupted into cheers, their applause rolling like waves against the stage. Kokoi opened his eyes, startled, emotional. His voice quivered for a moment, but he held firm, powered now not just by hope, but by the validation of someone who believed in him instantly. And still, he kept singing, because this was his moment, his truth, his victory beginning to unfold. The cheering inside the ABS-CBN studio was still echoing when the scene shifted to a special broadcast room prepared for an international feature, one that would connect Filipino talent to the global stage. In a dim, sleek studio filled with screens, a quiet tension settled as Simon Cowell took his seat, arms folded, eyes sharp, ready to watch Kokoi Baldo's blind audition for the voice of the Philippines. The producers had invited him for a rare cross-show reaction segment, curious to see how one of the world's toughest judges would respond to a humble Filipino reggae singer from Bacolod. As the video began, Simon leaned slightly forward. The screen showed Kokoi entering the stage, dreadlocks swaying, eyes carrying the weight of a man who had lived through struggle and survival. Simon noticed the way Kokoi held his guitar with both familiarity and reverence, as if it was his lifeline. There was something different here, something raw that most polished contestants never carried. The moment Kokoi strummed the first chord, Simon's expression changed. His eyebrows rose, his posture straightened, and the faintest smile tugged at the corner of his lips. He wasn't just listening. He was absorbing the story behind the sound. When the lyrics, one day, filled the speakers, Simon exhaled softly, almost in disbelief. This voice, he murmured under his breath. His tone had no sarcasm, no judgment, only respect. As Kokoi continued singing, Simon's eyes followed every small detail. The tremble of his fingers, the way emotion poured through each line, the sincerity that couldn't be faked. He recognized something he rarely saw. An artist who sang not for fame, but because music was the very thing keeping him alive. When APL.AP turned his chair on the screen, Simon chuckled. He didn't even need the chorus to decide, Simon said. That's the sign of real star power. But then his expression softened. The kind of softness only shown when something touches him deeply. Simon lowered his voice, speaking as if Kokoi were standing right in front of him. This is what people don't understand, he began. Great singers come from talent. Great performers come from experience. But legends come from truth. This man sings the way people breathe. Natural. Honest. Unfiltered. He leaned back in his chair, eyes still on the screen. If Kokoi walked into an AGT audition, he continued, I promise you the entire room would stand before he finished the second verse. I would put him straight through, not because he's perfect, but because he feels real. You don't teach that. You don't train that. You can only live it. The producers behind the camera grew silent, mesmerized by Simon's sincerity. He wasn't performing. He wasn't being dramatic. He was genuinely moved. Simon shook his head in admiration. You know what I hear in his voice? The Filipino spirit. Resilience. Hope. Pain. Faith. Everything at once. And that is world class. The video ended with Kokoi smiling shyly on stage, unaware that far beyond the studio walls of Quezon City, one of the world's most influential judges had just witnessed his soul. Simon glanced away from the screen, his eyes softer, his smile almost proud. That performance, he said quietly, is the kind that reminds the world why we listen to music in the first place. And in that moment, Kokoi Baldo, street singer, father, dreamer, had unknowingly touched a man who had seen thousands of talents and forgotten most of them. But not him. Not tonight. Tonight, the whole world felt what the Philippines had always known, that greatness can rise from anywhere, even from the quiet streets of Bacolod, carried by a reggae singer who refused to stop dreaming.